So today we are here to talk a little bit about your experience with hypnosis and how hypnosis might have helped you more than, let's say, maybe other modalities, or how you benefited just in general with hypnosis. And so, yeah, I'll just give you the floor for that.
Okay, and you want my testimonial of like my personal experience
Yeah, so
for,
even
okay.
like, yes, your testimonial, but also just how you've been, like, even though you have been working with somebody else indirectly, like
Okay.
how that has still affected your life too.
Okay. And I think I can kind of speak like broadly generally. But yeah, I think I've been in talk therapy, psychotherapy for over 5 years now. And I think it took me many years to get to a place where I had a little more control over my reactions to certain situations. And through one session of hypnotherapy, I felt like I reached that level again that I had slipped away from in just under an hour. So it was really the same level of care and depth that I was able to achieve with many years of talk therapy by just sort of breaking through the walls that I had built up. I feel like we all sort of create our own realities. And what hypnotherapy has done is helped reshape those realities in a way that makes life a little easier. So by saying, okay, well, maybe that person isn't going to react that way to the thing that I say or do, I don't have to get worked up before I even have the conversation. Or maybe this experience isn't going to be as painful as I thought. And so I think hypnotherapy has helped sort of reshape my perception of my reality.
Yeah, and so how would you say that hypnosis is different than traditional talk therapy? Because I know that's, a worry that some people have is they're like, well, she's not a licensed therapist, so why should I trust her with the amount of emotional depth that I have?
Yeah, it's hard to describe. I think so. My experience is that I was able to get to a level of vulnerability much more quickly than I was in talk therapy. It took me a really long time in talk therapy to get to a point where I was being honest, like fully honest with my therapist. And I think at times, even I wasn't being very honest. After 5 years, I still was kind of holding some things back. And I think the hypnotherapy session got me to a place of vulnerability because we weren't talking explicitly about my experiences. We were talking about sort of this imagined space where we could role play certain scenarios. And so it didn't require me to be fully honest about how I felt in a past experience or how I acted in a past experience or what I did. And so the hypno session was more about let's create a temporary reality and explore this space and explore the feelings that come up in that space, almost like a dream, right? Like our dreams are a space for us to practice scary situations so that we can sort of learn to cope with those experiences in a very safe space, right? So you can cope better when you're awake and maybe faced with those situations. And so it felt like almost like dreaming, where it's, I know I'm in a safe space, I'm creating this new reality where maybe I'm floating away or something like that, but I still have control of the environment. And then I can put myself in a situation that is uncomfortable or scary and it's not real. So I know that I'm safe from any real threat or harm, but I can explore those feelings and quickly cope with them as they come up when I'm in reality.
And so how is that different than, let's say, a traditional talk therapy session?
Yeah, I'll say, at least for me, my talk therapy experience has been talking about things that happened in the past week. And I might get feedback on perhaps what the other person was thinking in that moment, or feedback on how I could change and do it better. But it's very situational. For me, my experience has been talk therapy is we're going to talk about this specific incident, how that impacted me in the moment, and how I might reflect on that and change my behavior in the future. Hypnotherapy was, let's explore this reality. Let's create this sort of fake scenario and explore that and role play and see it. It was very much just emotional. It wasn't clouded by my thoughts, my assessment of my own behavior. It was very freeing. So it was just a session of imagination and exploration versus here's a very real thing that happened and XYZ resulted from that and how that might look if it happens again.
And so, what about your experience as someone on the outside looking at someone else's hypnosis experience? And so, what has that been like?
So, having my daughter go through hypnosis as well has been, what do I want to say? I need to think through before I start talking. Having my daughter go through hypnosis has been pretty enlightening. I have noticed big differences in her ability to control herself. She's not getting triggered as often. And it was honestly a little scary at first, if I'm being completely honest, because she seemed so different at first. And I worried, has this experience kind of stripped away who she is as a person just because the difference felt like night and day. But as the days went on after the session, I found that she very much is the same person that she always was, just with a lot more peace and calm and fewer triggers. And then what's been difficult for me as the parent is then going back and looking into myself and saying, okay, this person has changed. They are changing their behaviors, and I need to reset my nervous system to expect that change. Because I'm still in a state where I'm expecting triggers and I'm expecting the old behavior, but it's not happening. And so I am in a state now where I'm trying to figure out what that means for me, how that impacts our relationship, and what I need to do differently and how I need to think differently to show up in this relationship.
And so, what is that like for you to come to this realization of like realizing you have to retrain your nervous system to expect this new version that you wanted so badly?
Yeah, truthfully, there's a lot to unpack there. So, in the years of my own talk therapy, I felt like I made big changes, but then my friends and family were still expecting me to be triggered by certain circumstances and things like that. And I remember feeling frustrated that I was not being given the grace to express how I had changed. And so, thinking about how I've been treated in the past as someone who has grown and changed for the better and not being given grace for that, I am really trying to put myself in my daughter's shoes to say how frustrating that is that someone's not giving me that grace. But it's not that simple to just reset your nervous system. And so I may need another hip session to help me reset. We did a lot of that work for me in one session. I really feel like I was able to explore that space where she's getting triggered and now I'm triggered, but let's reshape that reality to look different. And it's been, I'm almost experiencing the same thing with myself where I'm like, wait, am I going to get triggered now? No, I'm in control. So it's been very interesting and maybe challenging, but still easier than the reality that we were living before. It's taking some time to get used to these new people.
Yeah, and so how long did it take for you to, or for y'all's dynamic to come to this point? So I know we haven't worked together for very long. And so I'm more curious about your interpretation of just like the quickness of how everything has unfolded.
I would say that everything happened really quickly. The changes were immediate, especially compared to our experience with talk therapy. The change is instant. As soon as that session ends, that change exists. And then the time after is just that adjustment period to, am I okay? Am I different? Am I feeling good? Are you feeling good? And so the adjustment period is still ongoing, I think, for us as we are, exploring these really relaxed nervous systems that we have now. But it's maybe feels a little confusing at times just because of the newness of it. But through conversations and lots of check-ins with each other to say, okay, are you still feeling as good as you felt after that session? Yes? Okay. Great. And just having other conversations about, okay, where do we go from here? Is there something else that we want to explore with hypnosis? Just having those conversations and check-ins makes it easier to progress even faster through the exploration phase.
Yeah, and then I think my last question would be, has you and your daughter's dynamic shifted since hypnosis? And if it has, how so?
Oh, I was gonna say, yes, our dynamic has shifted since having a few sessions of hypnotherapy between us both. We have still had some moments where we're misunderstanding each other, and maybe there's a new trigger that has popped up that we haven't seen before, and that's something that we want to continue to explore later. But in general, we are handling those situations so much more calmly, and we're able to have conversations and get through the issue rather than just both being in an elevated state and building upon each other and then creating a full-blown argument. We're able to just pause for a moment and let's talk through, what are you feeling? What am I feeling? Where are we feeling it? Where's it coming from? Okay, now let's move forward with the resolution. So it's been a lot quieter in our home.
Perfect. I love to hear that. And so is there anything else that you would like to add to your experience of hypnosis before I wrap this up?
I think so. Let me think of the best way to word it. I guess what I want to say is I think that there's something very special about you, Jerissa, because I think that you bring a unique ability to read people very quickly and assess their needs and adjust the treatment to benefit them the best, is what I've noticed.
I really appreciate that. I like to think that I do have that skill set, but I do try to tread very carefully considering I'm not a licensed therapist. And so if you were to give any advice to somebody who was like, well, she's not a licensed therapist, and I have all these issues, then what would you tell them in regards to working with me?
And I do understand that it's a different sort of treatment for issues that people might have. And so I understand the apprehension. We both experienced it before our sessions. Like, is this going to work? I think the best thing that I can say is there's no risk of harm. The worst thing I think that could possibly happen is that it doesn't work, but that's not been my experience. And it's not I don't know how to say it. It's like, it's not what you think it is. I think your explanation of how this hypnosis works takes some of that apprehension away. You explained that you are not hypnotizing people to behave a certain way, that you are breaking the current hypnosis, you're breaking the current behavior patterns and freeing people out of their very narrow mindsets or perceptions of the world. And so it's not about putting someone in a box and adding a few extra ingredients and making them a different person. It's about stripping off those outer layers that we've built up over our lifetimes and getting back to our truer selves.
And that leads me to one more question in which I know that a lot of my clients, they have really heavy emotions that they have struggled with. And I would like to know a little bit about your experience with experiencing some of those heavier emotions through the lens of hypnosis. Like, how safe did you feel? Did it feel too overwhelming? Like, how easy was it to access? Just whatever you want to kind of talk about in regards to this space.
Yeah. So I think, well, I'll say I do not like to cry. I would say to a degree I have a fear of crying. I don't like being vulnerable. And through this one hypnosis session, I was able to get to a point with you very quickly where I felt comfortable being vulnerable and having those big emotions. I think I was still pretty apprehensive at the start, but you very quickly got me to a place where I felt comfortable. And there were steps involved. So it was step one, relax in this position. Step two, I'm going to offer you a different position that might open your nervous system up to experiencing some of those emotions. And I remember in that moment feeling like, nope, I'm going to keep this tighter position first. Thank you. And then within a few extra minutes, I was ready to be fully vulnerable and allow those emotions to come through, which I didn't expect, but it happened quickly, but through a series of progressive steps.
And that leads me to another question, even though my last question was a
Yeah.
few questions ago. And so I remember with our session, which it doesn't happen with every session, but I remember with our session that I had you kind of come into these different somatic positions based on where you were feeling at the time, that in my interpretation were meant to help you feel safe in regards to going a little bit deeper in with whatever you were experiencing at the time. And so what was your experience like like moving physically, moving your body physically in like different, like let's say like yoga, we'll just say yoga positions for somebody who's like, what is she talking about? We'll just say
Mhm.
like yoga, very comfortable yoga positions as you're going through this experience.
Yeah, so I think the somatic element of the session was critical for me. So going through from a standard seated position into different yoga positions to really allow myself to access some of those deeper emotions, that was critical for me. I immediately felt access to those emotions the moment that I shifted into a different position and when you guided me to access those feelings. And also, I was able to control them. I felt like I could turn them off in a moment when you would say, all right, now let's shift to this different emotion. I felt like I had a lot of control to be able to do that. So I felt safe yet vulnerable. I felt safe to be vulnerable and to allow those bigger emotions to come through, but they really were accessed by being in a different yoga position than just the seated, more tense position.
You know, it's interesting because most people think of like just the seated as like a safe space. It's just like,
Mhm.
but it's like when you're going through really intense emotions, this is a very tough position to be in because it's just so open and vulnerable, you know? And it's like when you're carrying such heavy emotions, you don't want to be in a physical position of openness because I know that some of my clients, they're like kind of back like this. They want to rest their head back. And it's like, right now, I know you're experiencing a lot of grief or heartache or sadness or disappointment. It's like the last thing that I know you want to do subconsciously is put your chest out, you know, put your heart space out.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to watch clients shift their relationship with their emotions in real time as they go through this experience. And so my very last question for real this time is what or has your relationship with your emotions shifted since our experience together?
Yeah, I would say that my emotions have shifted slightly since our session in that I just feel like I've broken through some of my own walls and I have easier access to those emotions. I'm not afraid of those emotions. I'm comfortable saying, those emotions are here. Maybe now's not the right time to deal with them, but I'm going to give myself the space to feel them and process them at a later time. But in general, I just feel like I have a little more control. I feel like those big feelings might be there, but they don't overwhelm me. They don't scare me because that was really my issue is if I feel scared or sad or whatever big emotion, then it snowballs. I'm afraid of being afraid or I'm afraid of being sad. And so then I layer on additional emotions that get me into a much more heightened state. And so I feel like now those emotions may come up and I can acknowledge their presence without feeling like I need to layer on additional fear or other emotions.